back to what's the point? What's the point is North Lanarkshire's very own answer to informative and topical and highly questionable information that we present to members of the public, Jerry, just to make sure that they are politically aware, and we've done so by the viewpoints as residents. So just to make that abundantly clear. But anyway, welcome back. This is our third episode.
Thank you, Greg.
I'm sure we're glad to be back here, and always a welcome to you, Jerry, to be back in your hot seat to talk about not only just PFI, Jerry,
Greg,
but other things.
It's always an extraordinary pleasure
Yes.
to be in your company, as with Paul.
And we've invited back our good friend, Mr. Damasio. And might I just add, at the moment we've had lots of mail-in, Paul highlighting
He's
how
looking
much you
great,
do look
isn't he?
like Fabio. So
Yes.
well done. There, the reversion of Fabio.
He's looking fantastic.
Can't believe you got back in.
It's like as if we made a Wish version of Fabio. Anyway, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. We've got lots to unpack today. I wanted to have this as an opportunity to open it up a wee bit. You'll be quite surprised we've actually got mail. And we're going to base today's discussions not only on previous subject matters, but especially those who have contacted us with their own questions.
Is this like kind of Blue Peter?
Do you know what?
Where the mailbag comes in?
A big bag and kid on it. We had all sorts of mail in it and Paul each one out. But anyway, we'll do that probably at a future episode. But today, believe it or not, we actually had a question come in from someone, and that question was about council selections. How do you become a councillor? And my goodness, there is three best placed to answer that question. Now, I want to start off this week just with our own understanding of council selection processes. So you join a political party and you decide that you're going to stand for council. Mm-hmm. How does that process work? But on top of that as well, what I also want to talk about is once you're there, what happens, because the game only begins. Let's not kid on about it. And when you get elected, so how do you survive the political framework? How do you try and manoeuvre within that to bring about change, which we continuously talk about? And how do you make best representation for the people that put you there in the first place? So, who wants to start?
I was elected in 2022, and I had never been through the process before. I'd been involved in election campaigns like you both, as a member of the SNP, myself as a member of the Uddingston and Belsill branch, so helped out leafleting, been around the polling stations, getting out the vote on the day, all of that kind of thing. But the dark arts around selecting candidates for council elections was something that I had no concept about at the beginning. And I remember being at a branch meeting where we were looking to select individuals from the branch to go forward to join the council campaign committee, the SNP council campaign committee, which was the body used to select the candidates who were going to stand.
Sorry to interrupt. So council campaign committee is a selection of individuals who really in effect decide what councillors are going where.
Absolutely.
And our council candidates are going where. So they're no councillors yet.
No, they're not. They're candidates. So sometimes you're looking, but most of the time, you're looking at members of a branch who have been, over the course, they've had some campaigning experience, have maybe been a member of the branch for, a decent number of years, and they might put their name forward to be a candidate, sort of thing. So the council campaign committee looks at those candidates that are going to go through. They look at your nominations plan that you're going to have for those individuals that are going to go through, and then along with the leader of your group, you'll work on a campaign manifesto, the platform on which you're going to stand. And I ended up through some dark magic, i.e. this man here putting me forward to be the treasurer of the North Lanarkshire SNP Group Council Campaign Committee. So I was the treasurer. I had absolutely nothing to do. There was no...
No, it's not a role that you have to commit a dedicated amount of time to.
It's absolutely not. But what it did, it was a great learning experience. So I'm grateful for that, because it shone a light on the dark arts that present themselves when people
within North Lanarkshire SNP.
Within North Lanarkshire SNP, as to how we managed to get around the 21 or so wards that we've got and identify the candidates. So, so I'm on the council campaign committee, and you're working with the various branches to decide whether or not they're going to run 2 candidates per ward. So most wards in North Lanarkshire Council have 3 or 4 candidates. So the SNP, and I guess we can only speak for the SNP because we've never been members of any other parties, Labour or Conservative or whatever. But the SNP have never been in a position where if they put 2 candidates up, they didn't get one in place, and that's the history of it. So generally, you're looking at finding a way to identify your 2 or 1 candidates to go through for each ward, and they go through a process where they're tested by the party in the first instance, and then you go to your branch for you know, to go through the process where you're selected and your branch say, Paul, as a member of Airdrie Shorts SNP, you've been tried and tested, we're happy for you to go through as a candidate. And that's the way it kind of works in theory. Yeah.
So I got elected in 2017, and I'd stood for a couple of selection processes in Glasgow and various other places. But I made the decision and run up to the council elections that was me. I was ready to stand after being involved in the party for a number of years. And one of the things for me is, because you've been round the block on a number of occasions, and I was in the party before the referendum, so I knew exactly it was the old smoky room and let the Jardine People's Front who's standing for election. Pick him. And that was the mantra that we always do when we put candidates forward for elections. We always do, we will lose. And so you never had any high expectations, especially like the general elections, Scottish Parliament elections, etc. But 2014, all of a sudden, boom, the party grows exponentially. There was no proper management structure in place for that growth, in my opinion, which allowed just for the playing fields to be vastly opened up. So all of a sudden, and by the way, I'm no disparaging that. I think a broad church approach to politics is absolutely phenomenal, and it is required. When I stood in 2017, and you and I were obviously running at that time, Paul, and we were successful that year. What's always surprised me is how that council candidate selection process kind of unfolds. Now, all the years we've heard all sorts of stories in North Lanarkshire when it comes to not only just the SNP but politics in general, about certain individuals getting pals in and various things like that. There is a degree of that, of course there is. However, the point being here is, which I've always found surprising, it seems to me that if you're walking for milk one day and it just so happens
you may be accosted and asked to stand.
Somebody that's in a high position within the party, you're press ganged. I always have this image in my head that I'm just all running about, tapping somebody in the shoulder and whacking them all the head and getting them in the back of a van and they're a candidate. So that seems to be the impression that I have. I've also spoke to a number of people over the years as well, that's the kind of way that works. But within that selection process, Paul, tell people watching this, because people don't know, what is that happens? So you want to decide that you're going to stand for council, and then what happens?
It then goes to a vote, obviously, of the membership. So yeah, once you have been through the vetting process and passed the voting process, there then is a ballot, which is generally online these days, but a ballot also through the post for those who aren't online. The membership then have a decision to make. However, what tends to happen, in my experience within the SNP North Lanarkshire, is
that's fairly good.
In my opinion, in my experience, people load the membership with individuals.
What do you mean load the membership?
And in some instances, things would go to a physical vote on things as well. But generally, when it comes to this selection process, certain members, quite often already elected members, whether it be councillors, MPs, MSPs, have the membership loaded locally and put up their own candidates. So you might,
they can
influence this.
Absolutely. And in my experience, certainly in Airdrie Shorts, that happened.
That's my experience.
Every time there was a selection process. So yeah, you would have perfectly good candidates, very good candidates, on occasion who would miss out because somebody had a tap on the shoulder by those in the know and wants to be on their team.
Why do you think we've been in that position, Jerry? Why do you think that we've got great candidates that could potentially be very, very good elected members for the local communities? Why would we bypass them, Jerry?
I'm going to go against something that I said last week, but I'm a really positive person. In this respect, I'm quite cynical now. This did not happen in my experience because when I was a member of the SNP, the branch that I was in, the Bellshill and Uddingston branch, was actually a very good branch, very transparent branch, good people involved in it. I'm no longer a part of it now, but those good people, many of them still exist there. But basically, the branches are controlled, and elected members in senior positions, whether you're an MSP or whether you're an MP, if you can control the branch and the candidates that are going forward for council, and you can control your councillors, so you might choose to employ them, for example, you might choose to give them a job in your constituency office.
So then you're stuck then because you're a slave to the wage in that part.
Slave to the wage. So for 5 years, if you've got wages, potentially 2 wages. So I mean, it's not uncommon for husband and wives or partners to be working for the same, or other family members working for the same MSP or MP. So it's a really it's potentially an insidious sort of nepotistic arrangement where you get yourself into power, you then control your constituency office, you bind people through salary, you then have control over the branch,
potentially the voting
mechanisms, and indeed input in the candidates that go forward.
My experience as well, I think quite often the people with those bulk voting powers basically can decide who they want to be the MP or the MSP candidate.
Right. So do you think that's what it's about then?
Therefore, more often than not, in my experience, those individuals and people close to them end up on the boot.
So really in effect, right, I'm wee Jimmy, I stay locally, I've been involved in a campaign about a swing park or something like that. All of a sudden I've seen that I've made a difference in relation to that swing park. I come forward, speak to my local MSP or elected member, and then all of a sudden I'm getting tapped on the shoulder to say, do you want to stand? So
what do you need?
What do you need to then take that process forward?
20 names.
20 names, because that's the important point. That is a very important point. Within the political framework, they want to fool you with this veneer that you need a branch or you need the approval of X, Y and Z, but actually it's needs 20 signatures. 20
well, in our experience in the party that we were previously...
Might have changed since we've left. I highly doubt it, because it's been the same process for God, time immemorial. But point being is again, these people who do dominate, who do control, they want to put out that misconception that there's somehow some superior process happening in the background, etc. But actually, when you boil it all down, you only need 20 branch signatures. Get that approved, and then the next step, I know what that is. You get that lovely phone call. We want you to attend a vetting. We want you to come along and tell us why you should be selected, etc.
Well,
let's go there.
Well, that's quite interesting, because I got that phone call. You may well have got that phone call. You may well have got that phone call
more than once.
But not every candidate will get that phone call.
What do you mean within North Lanarkshire SNP group? No every candidate got
Again,
that.
in my experience, some individuals went through a very, very long and arduous process of producing a document in the beginning, looking at 6 areas where you put in your why you think you benefit your communities, and you would talk about your experience as a campaigner and as a manager, and all the rest of it. You put that in, that's got to be seconded by an elected member or a senior person in the branch, and that goes forward for consideration. If that goes through, you'll then get that phone call where you're invited to then. Towards the end of the campaign, if you can't get your quota, so if 21 wards or 22, is it 21 or 22 wards? I think it's 21 wards, right, in North Lanarkshire Council, generally you're looking for 2 candidates each ward. But what if you don't get 2? Are you going to go through that vetting process from beginning to end, or are you going to...
Well, the vetting process...
Are you going to pull people in at the end in order to make your numbers
separately up? So that's meant to sit within a headquarters structure, right? And I can give you an example of that as well. When we stood in... When was the election? 2022? 2022.
Yep.
2022. When we stood in that election in 2022, right? Out of the entire SNP group, there was only 3 individuals who were vetted within that. So every incumbent...
Three sitting councillors?
Every incumbent councillor, it was passed straight right through. Didn't have to sit vetting. There was only 3 that was highlighted for vetting.
I'm going to guess that 2 of them...
I'm going to tell you, 2 sitting at this table right now, because they were the former leadership team, and in addition to that, not only was it just us 2, but the leader in the then SNP group. So quite surprising. Yes, quite surprising. So the ex-leader of the SNP group, when Paul and I were in position, a man who has stood, by the way, in general elections back before the time the party was popular, was a strong nationalist through and through, has dedicated his life work to this party. He was vetted. My goodness, what a reward that was to him. What a reward.
And so are you saying that other individuals who had joined the party in 2014 have never been involved in politics at all?
Well, there's a question in this as well, because I find it interesting. As soon as you join, and I can only talk about the SNP, and I can only talk about my experience within that. I've never been a member of any other political party, unlike other colleagues who were in the Lib Dems and Labour and all these different other political parties. I think you can kind of tell sometimes the ones that jump about. Well, Conservatives, there was a Conservative in that cohort.
Oh, that's right.
But I think you can always tell, and I've always tried to get away from tribal politics. Listen, it's usually one question that separates me from a Labour elected official. That's basically it. Constitution. That's the only thing that divides us. Quite a lot of our politics is aligned. But the point being to that is when you think how that sort of revolving door works within and I don't know why, but again, everybody seems to set their sight on councillor thinking it's going to be a stepping stone to MSP, MP, and that's where they're going to get the majority of their power. I always find it interesting that when you look on the broad and you've got elected officials coming in, they've got false history. So all of a sudden, when never been involved in the party, I've never seen any of these individuals on campaigns, and I've campaigned for a number of years, and not only get the opportunity to meet people, you bump into people, that kind of thing, you have a bit of chat, because you're usually door knocking or going out to vote a survey or whatever it may be. And it's always dead interesting, the ones that say, I was in that campaign. Or all of a sudden, that MSP says, well, that person packed envelopes for me, so they were involved in that campaign. Okay. And there is a number of them within North Lanarkshire, let's not kid on about it. So, how easy is it, as I said, wee Jimmy, come back to that example, out there, fighting for the play park. By the way, I want to be a candidate, and in our experience, an SNP candidate. He's been to vetting, he's got his 20 signatures, what happens next?
Once he gets that, well, it may well be that there's, depending on the number of candidates that are selected, that go through the vetting process, you might have a hustings. So, a hustings? You might have a hustings. So, a hustings, for those who don't know, is the point at which your candidates who want to go forward, just say there's 2 seats, there's two councillors
vying for one seat.
right? You maybe have 3 or 4 candidates for that. So you're tested in a public forum where you're standing up on a hustings and people are firing questions at you because they want to test your mettle and see if you've got what it takes to withstand the pressure, because it is quite a pressured role, and you're asked to go in front of camera, you're asked to go in front of 77 other members and often a full public gallery, so you need to be on it. And a hustings is often used to separate the wheat from the chaff, I feel like.
Do you think, Paul, sometimes, because my experience, I've done a fair few hustings, and God, you can't get me to shut up half the time. But as I say, I've done a fair few hustings over the years, right, and I always find it amazing that you think that's looking to the broader membership. You think the broader membership is going to come along, those who are no strategically aligned in things. And my experience has always been, you've got that wee group all there that can't stand you, that wee group all there that can't stand you.
Within.
And then they just fire everything that they want to get their vile and their hatred out. Do you think that there's a point in a hustings anywhere considering that...
Given the way certainly the SNP group in North Lanarkshire and most of the branches operate, probably in reality very little. It's important that the membership do get that opportunity, but what tends to happen is you get a few members who don't generally perhaps attend things or go campaigning, but they're a member and they put their money in,
Pay their dues
and help the party that way. You'll get a few people that turn up, but what tends to happen is, you say, the cliques come out, the block voting, they all come out to give the other candidate a hard time.
Are you trying to suggest, Paul, and I hope you're not, that somebody who's an envelope stuffer in the office with not very much practical political experience at all, but who has an ear to influential people who might be elected, would have more sway or more influence over wee Jimmy, who's been fighting over the last 18 months to get a swing part for the kids in the estate, and he loses out because of that sinister arrangement where the control mechanisms are in place from elected members through offices and branches and jobs and all the rest of it. So the wee guy loses out.
That's fair to say, Jerry. In my experience going back, I was a foot soldier for the party. So going back in my experience initially, before becoming elected, I was just out campaigning, doing my bit, and some people encouraged me to throw my hat in the ring when it came to the council elections, and fortunately passed then. And I think it's worthwhile touching on we're coming back to this, but how headquarters manage the whole process as well, and how that affects the local process. But when it came down to...
I was coming on to that. You jumped ahead of me there, Paul, but thank you.
When it came to selection process for me, other people had other ideas about who they wanted to position. They already had people in mind, so I had to work particularly hard day in, day out.
Which you would expect.
Speak to the communicate with the membership to get support.
But you would expect that. I think that's a good thing when people are forced into it.
Yeah.
I think it is very, very
But it's
helpful.
weighted, that's the issue.
Do you know the thing that's always shocked me, right? This is the thing that's always shocked me. I believe politics should be a broad church. I believe political parties should be a broad church. Everybody should have differing opinions because that's where consensus can be found. But my own personal opinion, the SNP lost that aspect of consensus. That was new domination, and it was about certain individuals trying to control branches, it was about certain people trying to control makeups, and like you say, coming back to your earlier point, whether that be for higher office because they're trying to control the branch to make sure that they've got the numbers to secure their vote.
Greg, I think that exists across
all political
all the big I think it exists among all the big parties, and I don't think the SNP are any different from Labour or the Conservatives or the Lib Dem. The same thing exists. You've got the office, you've got people in paid positions, you've got a captive audience,
Yeah.
and then you can control the minions underneath
Funnily
it.
enough, because that idea of being in paid positions, I think this is one of the largest groups within North Lanarkshire that I've ever seen, where the amount of councillors that's in the SNP group, the number of them who work in offices of MSPs and MPs, I think that's quite considerable. Because I think, God, when was the last time we looked at that? I think it was, is it 10 or something like that? I think it is, office staff.
Which is about a third of the group.
Which is a bit further the group. Now, if you think about that, when that comes to votes and that comes to different things, you've got competing interests on the outside for MSPs to make sure that, let's go kid on about it, the government rhetoric or government lines have to be followed. So say for Tom's sake that we know for a fact that Scottish Government's going to cut bin collections, then all of a sudden that's going to be an agenda that's getting spun within that group set. Now, my experience is that information is never coming forward. That's no really about that. By the way, MSPs and MPs are quite concerned about this coming out. We want to try and put it in such a fashion, X, Y, and Z. But it's normally I get a phone call, and that phone calls came for the tap high-ends and headquarters.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is the danger that when I don't want to say senior elected members, because there is no junior or senior elected members. Councillors have a particular remit, MSPs have a particular remit, and MPs have a particular remit. They get paid differently. Yeah. So if you want to have a hierarchy on pay, but none is senior to the other kind of thing. If you've got a good elected member, a good MP or an MSP, they will share with the group. Yeah. They will share with their branch, they'll share with the grassroots what's going on. They'll have genuine contact, or they swan off into the distance and they live their London life, or they live their Edinburgh life, and they keep things to themselves, because they get into they can often get into positions where it's about survival of the fittest, and the trappings of elected life, the publicity, the salary, the prestige that all goes with that must be really
definitely
enticing for some of them, and you become human beings become a captive to that. I mean that's
sorry to interrupt, but the interesting point here is, and this was the point I was coming on to make, this is the only job in the world, in my opinion, where you can have significant say or sway or matters that are very important to people, and that's every level of government, from being a councillor to an MSP to an MP, right up to the legislative roles. But you don't need a formal qualification.
It's a brilliant point. Right now, I'm going to post at the minute that I do work for an MSP, right? And I'm not a member of that person's party, and that's the way it should be. Because when you apply for a job with an elected member, they should be looking at your skill set. So my background over the last 20-25 years has been social housing, health and social care, and I've lived experience living abroad and stuff like that. So I had a decent political background as well to fall back on. But there will be individuals, because you then start to employ family members and friends who have absolutely no experience whatsoever. So they can come in with nothing. So if it was two people in a competitive environment looking to be employed as a caseworker, you can have one coming in with qualifications through the nose and not getting the job because...
Do you think that's an important point, Paul? Because you and I have been there since 2017. You and I have commented in the past, and again I'm not being disparaging to anybody here, but you and I have commented that it's surprising sometimes that we've known individuals who get elected at the same time as us, and they've yet to make a committee contribution. Any committee. They've yet to make a contribution at full council. They've yet to even speak in any due process, and that to me is absolutely astounding, considering the fact that you've been there for 8 years, 7 years, and you're there to represent. Now, don't get me wrong, this could be something that's just absolutely normal. Me personally, as the electorate and as a resident, I would want to know that I'm voting somebody that's going to be defending my local area, that's going to be standing up for my local area. Do you think that's a problem within the political sphere in North Lanarkshire, Paul? Do you think that?
Absolutely. There seems to be a hell of a lot of councillors who just seem to sit on committees and vote and do as they're told, frankly, and give very little input at committees. There are others who obviously give a lot of input, but you know, I think it's unforgivable to just sit there and I mean, you would expect everybody reads their papers and has an opinion on stuff. You would expect them to give that opinion. So when elected members just show up and sit there to the end of the agenda item and raise their hand or their voice accordingly at the end, it's, you know, that's not what they're there for. No. They're there to scrutinise things. So yeah, and that's the difficulty for me as well. And individuals are made, perhaps some individuals are there for the wrong reasons.
Do you think that comes back to Jerry's point in relation to cronyism and nepotism and things like that? When you're, let's just say hypothetically, if I'm there with my wife and my best pal and somebody else, and I'm the only one that's interested in politics, and I'm kind of got influence on how they vote and what they say and how they conduct themselves, do you think we're seeing more of that within North Lanarkshire? Because that is the only place that we can talk about.
I mean, I think it's, if you look at the number of elected members, look at MSPs, for example, and then you look at the number of councillors who are employed by them, working under their constituency officers, it's quite clear that exists. There's no denying it. There's no escaping it. So if you've been a councillor and you're elected as an MSP, for example, either through the list or first past the post, would it be uncommon for them to then employ fellow councillors who have helped them on the way up or who campaigned on their behalf?
Be office manager's job.
So generally these arrangements can be made. And what you're looking at is councillor's salary, just say roughly about £20,000. If you're a senior caseworker, for example, or an office manager, you're talking about 35-40 grand. So between the two posts, you're pulling in
almost the same as the parliamentarian.
I mean they're up about 67 or something like that. But you're not a kick in the backside off it. But if it's you and there's another family member who are working in there, then the household income potentially can be absolutely sustained by that constituency.
So say hypothetically then, if you're earning £50,000-60,000 coming in either through councillor salary and then working in offices, and you get no formal qualifications, so there was no other route to having that kind of money. Well, no wonder people are going to look to protect that.
I think it kind of takes you back a wee bit full circle as well there, because that is why there is the what we touched on earlier, that you have individuals who will support a candidate within the membership and get their wider clique or membership list, people who may have joined on their bequest to vote accordingly, as opposed to potentially voting for the best candidate. They're voting for the person potentially that individual or those individuals have put forward. And that, for me, quite, in my experience, more often than not, locally, hasn't, and when it comes to parliamentarians in particular, been a local person.
Paul, who's going to...
That's a big thing for me. So what you end up with is somebody that they want to bring in.
Well, the party should be anybody
from outside. Basically, because they're,
what's
in my opinion, onto a promise.
What's interesting for us is we've got two prominent sort of parliamentarians within North Lanarkshire that hold senior positions within the party and cabinet roles. You can only again talk about the Scottish Government because it's an SNP Scottish Government. Did they have any influence over proceedings at local authority level, do you think? And again,
right. So now we're actually going back to the future, because now you're going back to things where there are difficult conversations to be had around, just say ACC, and arrangements around community centres being closed, etc., and decisions being made unilaterally by politicians without going through the committee structures which made the decisions to close them in the first place. You then see a swathe of elected members, SNP and Labour, attending Civic Centre on the week of that by-election.
So it was.
So there's all manner of chicanery,
Background discussion.
and closed door discussions around these things. So absolutely.
Yeah.
And then some of them are quite happy to make these comments publicly on BBC Radio, for example, where Anas Sarwan
made the comments.
made the kind of comments. I can't remember verbatim what it was, whether it was knuckles were, racked or heads were
I want to come back here just to come back to the subject matter, right? So the subject is wee Jimmy, playground.
He's not going forward. He's not going forward.
So by the grace of God, he's found a miracle. He finds himself in the position to stand as a candidate for a party. He then gets elected for that political party, and really, in effect, quite quickly, he receives a council induction telling him, these are your committees, you get overloaded with information. What chances can you go to understanding that there? Surely internally within the party structure, you have an allocated buddy system or induction process that brings you right into the fold. Let's say it's a by-election, let's say it's halfway through the term, we're potentially looking at by-elections anew. So if a candidate stands, wins that by-election, comes into your political party, who puts their arm around you? Who tells you, by the way, this is what we need today? Do you think there's an induction process that exists for those individuals?
Can I briefly, Paul? I know you want to speak about this because you've been there longer than me. I came in 2022, and there was absolutely no. I'm not saying that there wasn't a formal induction programme put forward by Legal and Democratic, because they do.
Yes.
And they have to be commended.
Yeah.
For that. It's if you choose to go on those courses that they put on, that's down to you, and if you choose not to, then that's your fault for not doing it. But when I was elected in May, I was told that you had to sink or swim. You had to sink or swim. Now, I'd never been elected to public life before, and I knew it was going to be tough.
Yeah.
But trying to navigate your way through the committee process, the inner cliques or the inner the alliances that are made, and you spend the first. Everyone's an enemy, actually, because you don't know who's friend and you don't know who's foe. Yeah. So I had quickly to get advice from other people about who I might speak to, and I approached somebody to be my buddy. I did that early on. I didn't tell anyone, but I contacted him early on to say, look, I need help here. I'm not getting help from the leader at the time, who's no longer even a councillor. But without your advice and knowledge and experience, and fair play to you, you never pointed me in one direction or another. You left the decisions about who I allied and where I went down to myself. But there's absolutely nothing for new members coming in. So they walk in the door and there's nobody to help them. They're on about 10 committees. Yeah. They've got papers galore, hundreds and hundreds of pages about stuff that they don't know anything about. They're not given the historical context about decisions that have been made at previous committees 2-3 years down the line that are still working their way through before they go to vote, and you're just left to hang.
Is it a case of get in there, block vote, do what we tell you?
You do what I tell you.
This is a whip,
and that's the
issue.
That's where it goes back to where all these cliques, when all these cliques are formed, that then carries over into the council group, and you have individuals coalescing around one another. So,
or not.
What often happens, and has been my experience in the past, apart from when we were part of the leadership team, of course, Greg,
it was beyond reproach.
What you have quite often is information being provided, or people getting tapped on the shoulder who are part of that clique, or being welcomed into that clique, and information disseminated to the individuals that you want to encourage to as part of that clique. So quite often, in my experience, some members will get less information than others, or less help requested
Information's
than others.
power. Information's power. Although you mentioned that there when we had positions, which always makes me laugh when I think back, that I was attacked weekly for about a year solid just on the minutes because I was the secretary. Right, business only minutes, Jerry, as if I'm going to spend any great time writing these minutes every single week, verbatim minutes that was expected. And I always remember having to go in every single Monday, same individual, all the time. By the way, point of order, this bit here, this bit here. It was for the most simplest of things, and that comes down to that clique position. It was just a case of, no, we can't have him be in that position.
No, and that sadly is just power
Yeah.
politics. And we've spoken over the last few weeks about whip systems and about the major party involvement in local government. And there is a strong argument, I think, that we should be looking to ensure that candidates going forward shouldn't be aligned to the major parties. They should be community champions. They should, at the very least, have been on in their communities, have some experience of campaigns, have been an activist for not necessarily for party political benefit, but for community benefit. And once you've demonstrated that and your commitment to your community, you should go for it.
That leads us nicely. That leads us nicely to what's the point in voting for political candidates? Should it be, Paul, that majority of people within North Lanarkshire just back an independent? Because really, in effect, I've seen no benefit, absolutely none, for political parties being involved in local government.
Well, given what you've just said, I mean, going back to what we've spoken about previously, what ends up happening is inevitably, if I could just say the word,
Put your teeth back in.
MPs and MSPs probably have an unfair advantage or influence on the party member who they've employed. So there's that aspect as well. But yeah, I think there's I think at local government level, just the whole thing needs ripped up.
Yeah, started
again. But it's most certainly an argument to look at, as I say, local government is about local services. It's not about
politics. It's not about the political sphere of national politics.
There's an argument, dare I say it, for voting for the best candidate.
Well, vote for the independents.
That's going to help the local area.
See, your wee Jimmy who's campaigned for the play park, they're the ones that you should be voting for. But here's the point that I would make before I bring you in, Jerry. And again, this is very important. Jimmy's elected, Jimmy's in there, Jimmy's trying to survive in the political cliques and various other things. Is there a point? What is the actual point?
Jimmy is on to plums.
Yes.
Jimmy is on to plums because unless Jimmy aligns himself with the whip and with those who are in positions of power, generally the executive of the council group. So you've got your leader, you've got your deputy leader, you've got your secretary, you've got your business manager, and they generally tend to be handpicked to secure the leader's position. So if you don't align with, Jimmy doesn't align with that, he's going to get a difficult time. He will be, if you're in power, you're certainly not going to be made a convener. You'll be like John the Baptist. You will be the lone voice in the desert, crying out, saying the right things, but everybody around the table sitting with their fingers in their ear. And there's just another point I wanted to make. Because you don't generally end up picking candidates like me, Jimmy, to go forward, you end up with people who at the very last minute, when you're struggling to meet your quota for candidates going through, you are pulling people off the street to put themselves forward. And I know, for example, Paul, right?
And this isn't just the SNP, by
this
the
is
way,
this is
Labour as well, and other political parties.
Absolutely, there are individuals who are in positions now who stood in wards that they didn't know where it was. They didn't know. how many councillors were to be elected in that ward. They had no idea around the voting structure that's used in local government, so they didn't know it was a single transferable vote and that you're elected on quota. And I'm sitting listening to these people talking and I'm going, why are they here?
Yeah.
What is it? You know, when there's good people out there who would absolutely do great jobs for their communities who have been bypassed in order that people who are perhaps part of the branch network.
For me, it's a local issue, but it's also a national issue when it comes to the SNP. As I say, these are issues with all the national parties, I think, but certainly within the SNP, and I saw on the association, the councillors, represented all the SNP councillors in Scotland.
The CCC.
And never mentioned that. They never mentioned it.
Give them their due. They did push headquarters regularly on improving their vetting process, but more importantly the timetable. But what tends to happen is headquarters leave finalising that vetting process to the very last minute, and what you end up with is towards the end, weeks before the elections are about to start, they don't have their candidates sorted, and if they don't have everything sorted locally, there'll be various gaps, and that's where so and so gets a wee tap on the shoulder.
The funny thing is, the SNP's been using the same vetting questions since about 2013 or something. Listen, I swear it's the funniest thing ever. I think I've gave a majority of people what their questions would be. I've had them written down for years. So you can, anybody at all interested, you want to stand for the SNP, get in touch and I'll give you the questions.
We know of individuals who are now councillors who have not been through any vetting process at all.
Yep.
None.
Yep. So we don't know what the background is.
No testing whatsoever.
Tap on the shoulder from someone locally who then said to someone in headquarters, pass this person.
Yeah.
End of story.
That's it.
Yeah.
And
you're now a candidate. You're now a councillor.
Moving on, because I think we've kind of killed this to death, and it comes to the final word. Just so we're aware, Jimmy elected. Jimmy there in North Lanarkshire Council. Jimmy tried to fight for his community. Jimmy now getting all sorts of stick because he's conforming to the party whip. What's the point? What's the point in standing, Paul? Final word.
What's the point in standing? Well, again, round this table, I think we are a little bit different than a number of other individuals in these parties locally. So I think it's important that Jimmy stands up for what's right.
Absolutely. I have a wee pal, I wouldn't name him, but he's got this saying. He says, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. And that is so true in local government.
Yeah.
If you want to see meaningful change in your communities, elect people who will be your champion, not necessarily someone that will wear the proper colour.
Well, funnily enough, I was out this week, and it's at that time again where I'm the roving reporter. So I had the opportunity to jump up to Cumbernauld and ask people their questions about who would you vote for in an election if it was a council by-election, and do you know how to stand for council elections? But more importantly, there's a couple other questions in there, but I'll use that for a later segue. So we'll cut to that at the moment and then we'll come back. Thanks very much for doing the interview.
Yes.
Can I ask you a quick question? Do you know how to stand for council in North Lanarkshire?
Not really, no, unfortunately.
Would you know how to make a complaint against a councillor in North Lanarkshire?
No, unfortunately not either.
Thanks for doing the interview. Can I ask, do you know how to stand for council in North Lanarkshire?
No idea.
No. Has nobody ever made you aware? Have you ever seen any documentation or anything? No. Can I ask, see, you get main political parties in North Lanarkshire, so your Labour, SNP, do you think there's more of a place now than ever for independent councillors, or do you think the party framework works well?
I don't really.
You don't know, not a problem. And have you had a complaint against a councillor? Do you know how to make a complaint?
Yes, I think I know. I actually used to work for North Lanarkshire Council.
Oh, did you?
Quite a lot of years ago. But yeah, I think I know how to.
I'm sure the culture has very much changed since you were there, but listen, thank you so much for your help. Thank you. Thanks very much for doing the interview. In North Lanarkshire, you'll be aware that you elect your councillors. Do you know how to become a councillor?
I'm a community councillor.
You're a community councillor,
Yeah.
so you would know what the process is to stand for election. Do you think that there's enough representation for independent councillors in North Lanarkshire?
No.
Do you think the political grouping, so SNP, Labour, etc., do you think that works, or do you think it should be more inclined
I
for
think it should be more
independents?
independent people.
More independent
Yeah.
people? If it's a case that you have a councillor who you disagree with and what they've provided a response for, do you know how to complain about that councillor?
No.
No? Listen, thank you so much.
Nobody knows what to do that.
Well, thanks very much for that. So, we just get the opportunity to see that the majority of people have absolutely no clue about how to get elected. People don't really understand what the process is. And I think it's fair to say that in an unbiased way, it's not just the SNP that's got its problems. I think Labour, Tories, well, Tories have got bigger problems now than anybody else. But again, Labour's got its problems with internal selection processes, and I would imagine other political parties out there will have the same kind of issue. And I just come back to that point that we made earlier on. What is the actual point? Selecting the main political parties to stand at a local government level. Yeah. My own biased and personal view would be encourage every single person to vote for a local champion, somebody that's out there fighting for what they believe is the right thing to do with regards to the local area, and put your faith in somebody that's independent. Yeah, that's it. Right, I've got other stuff that I want to kind of concentrate on. And last week we had a brief discussion about council culture, and I wish I had that big nail bag here now just to pull this email out and say, Jerry, the email asked, you touched upon the kind of cultures that exist within the council. Could you explain that a wee bit better in more detail? Now, obviously, we're not looking to rehash old issues like PFI, etc. But what we want to focus in on is that culture that exists. We made a statement last week, there's a fear culture in relation to the Ethical Standards Commissioner. And what I wanted to do today was have the opportunity to try and explain to folk at home what we talk about and what we mean by ethical standards. Obviously, as elected members, we are bound by a code of conduct, which we sign on the day of being elected, and saying we will adhere to that practice. Yep. And it's ethics for elected members. Yeah. Now, within that, but we made the reference the last time that we met that there's a kind of culture where that's been weaponised now. Do you want to say a wee bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the first things that, and again, I speak as a resident. I speak as a resident and a new person to public life. The first thing that struck me was that I had to be careful. I had to be careful because I thought that I would have freedom to do and say the things that I knew to be right just by. I knew there was a code of conduct. I availed myself of that. I knew about the Nolan principles. I availed myself of those as well. So pretty comfortable that I would do and say the right thing, or at least not purposely get myself into trouble. But what's made clear from the minute that you are elected is that you are controlled. Yeah, you are controlled. You are controlled by the code. It's reiterated by members of your group. So if you're part of the wider group, it can be used as a tool to control you within the group, not to ask too many difficult questions, don't veer into that particular area, otherwise you'll get a standards complaint raised against you. So new members, new councillors in particular, who maybe haven't read all the codes of conduct or the Nolan principles, are terrified. And then you'll get it from the officers as well. The officers doing their job. You've got head of legal and democratic services, who is the liaison point between elected members and the Ethical Standards Commission. Yeah. So any training that's to be delivered is delivered by the monitoring officer. So there's this reiteration of control. Be careful. Watch what you're saying. It comes from officers, it comes from the leaders of your group, and before you know it, you're reluctant really to say or do anything. I remember putting out an email. One of the first emails I put out are posts post election, and I was contacted by the business manager to say, you need to get that down. That was really benign as far as I was concerned. Yeah. but it was get it down because you'll get a standards complaint.
Was that
Yes,
right?
that's a
Goodness
fact.
me.
So the culture of fear
Yeah.
is absolutely prevalent, and you need to work your way through that, and you need to be confident.
Yeah.
You need to change your mindset and get out of this silo mentality where you need to ask somebody if you can say or do whatever it is that you want to say or do, and be brave and fight through that.
Do you think, Paul, that sensitivities are at play? Because we're all elected, we know we're going to come in for a hard time. People are going to have strong opinions on us, whether you like us or whether you disregard us, whatever it may be. But the point being here is, do you think there's enough elected members with thick enough skin to take the negativity? Because really, in effect, when you look at it and you look at the culture within, and again, I can only talk as an individual who's witnessed it. Do you think that we have a culture where people are just so sensitive, where they've got to raise ethical standards complaints? Or is it a case, do you think it is actually weaponised? This is an opportunity for them just to submit complaints, and it's like playground telling on that's where we've entered into.
Quite clearly, there is a good purpose for the code being there in the first instance. So there's times when that code's very important in terms of how people behave in public life and what information they share, etc., and when. But because it has its sensitivities for whatever reasons. But I do think there is a culture within North Lanarkshire, within the political parties, most certainly, where people are basically,
Just spit it out, Paul. Just say what you're thinking. I don't know why he's trying to be so guarded here. Just say it.
Yeah, where the code is.
This is an example.
This is an example.
This is of you not feeling confident to say
To
what it is
talk
that you
about
really
this.
want to say for fear of somebody picking it up and raising a standards complaint against you.
I think so. And listen, that's not criticism.
So it's, as I say, it's. I think you used the word weaponised. I absolutely do think it is weaponised within the groups, but I do think, and officers have got a very, very difficult job to do. Got to say, there are times when they have to raise issues that might apply with regards to the code, but I do think that's used more often than it should be.
I think where we are, right, and this is my honest opinion, and as I said again, as an observer, because that is all I can really talk about. Point being here is there's an abuse of the Code of Conduct, in my opinion, and we can call it weaponised, you can call it whatever it is. Might be some people's opinion just good politics, that if you can get the opportunity to take out an opponent, then so be it. But problem being is I've had the opportunity to work in other local authorities, and what other local authorities, I talk to elected members in other local authorities quite frequently, close relationships, especially in sort of Inverclyde, Glasgow, other areas.
And they'll experience the same as we do.
They experience the same, but it's an opportunity for us to discuss what their experience is. And when I tell them that, like say, we've got senior, whether they're a council leader in council, encouraging officers to come forward with complaint about certain political groups, I tell them about the fact that when you go on the council's website and if you go to search Paul Demassio, Jerry Brennan, first thing you'll probably see on that is the ethical standards, code of conduct and how to make complaint. Now, it's kind of unusual in North Lanarkshire that would be kind of high up there on the list when you're going to search for your elected member. I don't really think it's coincidence. I don't want to be cynical in this. I want to obviously be honest. But the point being is, I think when I speak to other elected members, they're aghast that within our local authority that the Code of Conduct is being used so freely to stop elected members for raising their points, raising their concerns and having an open discourse in certain subject matters. And That's groups. That's political groups, etc. that I'm talking about. It's unusual in other local authorities for so many complaints to be made, either coming for the officer class or coming for elected members, and that's just anecdotal. I don't have any evidence to that. But as I said again, why do you think it's so different in North Lanarkshire, Jerry?
It's a good question, Greg, and I'll be honest. I don't know that I have the answer to that. I don't know if there is an historical sort of tendency for complete control. I don't. And
North Lanarkshire politics is pretty well publicised throughout the ages, all the way back to the Monklands, etc. Certain individuals who were involved in that time are now in positions of seniority within this council. So I think it's well documented.
Yeah, I can only speak from my perspective and how it lands on me, and it feels as if there is the control mechanisms are bearing down on you and impacting on your ability to act as freely as you would like, whether that's simply through the Code of Conduct or the Ethical Standards Commission, or how that's applied, how the training's delivered, how regularly it's referred to in either emails or internal training sessions, or when you're in your group meetings, if you're part of one of the larger political groups, how often it's referred to by the leaders of your group and the executive about be careful. Be careful.
Very afraid.
Be afraid.
Be very afraid.
And perhaps, Greg, that's why we're in a position often where some elected members don't contribute. They don't contribute at committee.
That could be the answer,
They don't contribute at group. They don't contribute at full council because they are reluctant to fall foul of the codes of conduct and ethical standards committee. So they're not really representing their constituents. You're getting a wee bit of them, but you're not getting
but you should be getting.
You're not getting 100%.
Do you think, Jerry touched on it last time we were here, Paul, do you think that pendulum shift, as you put it, Jerry, that pendulum shift is now way over in relation to where the relationship lies within North Lanarkshire Council to the sort of officer class? Do you think there's a proportionate balance there in relation to that? We've got the Code of Conduct, we've got the Ethical Standards Commission, and ultimately the Standards Commission for Scotland could call a hearing based on that investigative report, that when they come to say, right, X, Y and Z, you did this and this, we're going to take you to a hearing. Then within the Ethical Standards Commission, they have a number of things that they can enact against an elected member if they're deemed to have breached the Code of Conduct. Do you think the balance is there in relation to the officer class? Now then, and I need to be careful what I'm saying here, because ultimately this could potentially lead to an ethical standards complaint, but I'm just trying to look at it on the broad. I don't have any intent in these words. Do you think that there's a clear mechanism there that if elected members are dissatisfied, because ultimately the relationship with officers is based on trust? Do you think that there's a mechanism there that is equal to that Code of Conduct process?
Well, there isn't. There isn't an equal process. That's got to be said. That there is the body which falls. Well, there is an area of responsibility under COSLA who represent all local authorities. I think it's a joint negotiating committee for Scotland are supposed to oversee officers also. But ultimately, if you have a complaint about a senior officer within the council, it's taken up not through that national body but locally, and it's at the leader of the council's discretion as to my understanding. It's
interpretation.
It's down to the leader of the council's interpretation of any such queries or complaints.
So within the council,
what they do with it.
Within the council, you've got two structures. So the two structures is the SMT Code of Conduct, which is a document, I think it was only just recently passed at policy and strategy. I think was it this year or last year? I can't remember what it was. But the final agreements and what that SMT Code of Conduct looked like. And believe it or not, the person, so you come forward and make a complaint in relation to an officer, and that goes to Chief Executive.
Yep.
So as Chief Executive would be the person that overseen that process.
Yep.
When it comes to the Chief Executive, and what you referenced there is Joint Negotiation Committee for Scotland for Chief Executive Officers, that's what oversees the Chief Executive. Now, you think that and again, this is on advice for Cosler, I don't really think many councils enforce this. I don't really think it's really a thing, because when I made inquiry about it, it was kind of unheard of by a lot of people. But again, what you referenced
An
there
inquiry to further your knowledge
so
as
that's
to
basically it. I'm just trying to get an understanding
the
with
totality of the structures
that's
of
all it
governance.
is. So when you get to the fact that if somebody was so inclined and they came forward with a complaint in relation to the Chief Executive, that would then fall, and again, to that interpretation of the leader of that council.
Mm-hmm.
And so really, in effect, who watches the watchman? And who watches the watchman? Because when you think about the sort of salary scales here that we're talking, individuals on commanding remuneration,
Some of the big
significance.
Yeah. I mean, some of the bigger councils in Scotland, you're looking at salaries in the region of close to 180,000
£180,000.
pounds. It's huge.
The Prime Minister or the First Minister.
Yeah, so when you're on
A lot of responsibility.
I don't deny it, I really don't deny it, but I think that's a discussion for a future show, whether I know, is it value for money paying that kind of money to individuals. But as I said again, coming back to this point, if you've got a certain structure set there that's really loose, because there's no, because I've seen this paper, I've actually read it, it's very, very loose. So it's really doing an open to interpretation, and that interpretation could be just whatever that leader of a council thinks. So is that the right way to have an equilibrium or a balance of power?
So then
Or relationship, sorry, no power.
yeah, but I mean, you've got to look at the entire structure.
Yeah.
And the relationships that may well have, been in existence for many years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not suggesting that in any local authority in Scotland that impacts on decision making. But if the leader of a particular group, who's an elected member, who's a politician, it may not be in that individual's interest to take forward a complaint that you would make. Right. So where do you go if you're unhappy with that?
I don't think if you any other,
You've
not done any
you
mechanism.
don't
have
go
you?
anywhere. You don't go anywhere. You're
Yeah.
done. You're done.
So it's finished then.
It's
The complaint's finished.
It's finished because
Right.
there's no check and balance on that.
So whereas an elected member, if you make a complaint to the Ethical Standards Commission, the Ethical Standards Commission will conduct a full
Checks and balances everywhere.
full account of that. I always compare it to the Inquisition. And quite a funny thought I have in my head and how that transforms. But again, they're very thorough and they look at to investigate every aspect.
As they
They
should.
also seek comment for senior officers, especially the monitoring officer within the council.
Yeah.
And those comments can be quite weighted and at times, because that is the monitoring officer. Monitoring officers held in a very, very high regard. My opinion sometimes a wee bit higher than what the elected member's opinion is. But as I said again, I suppose it's an investigatory process and you're trying to get to the facts.
So across Scotland then you've got 32 councils.
Yeah.
Each of them will have a chief monitoring
Yeah.
officer.
32 monitoring officers.
So
across
32 across it, and generally they'll be solicitors.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
So any monitoring officer who puts pen to paper,
Yeah.
that carries with it the weight of
Yeah.
potentially the Law Society
Yeah.
of Scotland. So if you're not legally trained and you're a lowly member of the council, just a councillor like myself or you or Greg, as soon as that weight bears down, then you will be nervous.
Yeah.
I don't care what anybody says, because you're dealing with trained legal professionals.
Individuals that are coming for a position of authority, I think.
And positions of
that's the
power.
other one as
Absolutely,
well.
absolutely.
You don't want to advise yourself.
Well,
You
well,
don't
again,
have that, don't have that facility.
It comes back to this point again, Paul. Is there a balance? Is there a balance in this? In your honest opinion, do we have a balance though, or is it that pendulum coming back to your description? Is it way gone now? Because again, I'm going to come back to the point. Other local authorities and the opinions of those elected members and officers that I know in these various places, not one that when I speak to officers, we would never even remotely consider an ethical standards complaint on an elected member unless it was something of significance. Whereas what we are seeing is through the sort of ethical standards commission complaints for things that, as I said again, to me appear to be highly sensitive.
Yeah, if I look at the council standing up at a recent council meeting and encouraging officers to fire in ethical standards complaints against a particular group.
Yeah.
That some of us around this table belong to, because they had been asking very important, scrutinising and asking very important questions that in the run up to a committee. I mean, it really wasn't his place to stand up and do so, but I mean, complaints can be made about councillors to ethical standards.
I think it's one of the reasons, going back to that whole thing about...
And it's got to be fully investigated. Yeah, as I say, rightly so, but I mean, for the leader of the council to stand up and encourage officers to be putting complaints in about councillors, it's a bit much.
I think it's one of the reasons why it's important to be looking at independent councillors.
Yeah.
Because it takes that party power and structure away. Because effectively there's no check or balance on independent councillors. They act in the interests only of those who have elected them. Right. And that carries across the council because they're making decisions that are pan North Lanarkshire. So I'm not saying they're only interested in, for example, your ward or your ward or my own ward. But critically, independent councillors can't be reined in by other senior politicians. Because if you're asking horrible questions and we don't like the horrible questions that you're asking, then the party structures often come in and go, right, Jimmy, you're asking too many horrible questions. If you want to be a candidate next time around, I would be thinking about putting a sock in it. Otherwise, you'll not be running for council next year.
Or what tended to happen was you put a note in saying don't select them, and next time get them in front of a vetting panel. So we've unpacked quite a lot today. We've been around the houses. There were two subject matters which, for your mum again watching this, Paul, will not be used to that. Normally get 3 or 4 in there, but I think an hour and a half discussion.
Should be delighted to get another benching back.
two subject matters. I think that again, I think we've covered everything. Next time that we meet, I think that we're going to unpack quite a lot of internal workings, what happens when local communities are aggrieved at a certain situation. Where do they take their petitions? What's the sort of structure of having your right to reply in North Lanarkshire Council? And I think a couple of other subject matters I want to unpack. Hopefully by that point we're a wee bit clearer. And perhaps within news communities about certain subject matters that we'll be able to discuss. But on that note, all I can do is thank you both for your contributions.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you again.
And thanks very much to that one person that's been watching us all the way right through this. Thank you very much. What's the point?
What's the point?
What's the point?
Thank you.